Hello and welcome to this video on wheat beer. Wheat beer is a distinct style of beer that relies on a large amount of wheat when compared to the amount of malt. There are two main styles of wheat beer, one of German tradition and the other of Belgian. Different styles have evolved from these two and been localized, but in short you can summarily say they are the origins and the primary families from which wheat beer has evolved. Wheat beer is stereotypically very pale in colour. This is a product of the low malt content that has not been malted extensively. This light colour and sweet flavour often leads to it being served in unusual ways. This includes the addition of citrus wedges or combining it with a carbonated sweet drink. The average wheat beer is defined by at least 50% of its grain base being made from wheat. This can vary to something between 30 and 70% by region and labelling rules. There are a variety of prefaces to the beer part of this. One of these is wit, or white. This is particularly used in Dutch and Flemish style beers. Then you have Weisse, or Wies. This is the German equivalent for white, and is normally used for Berlin type beer. Sometimes you'll find it with the Bavarian styles as well, but in short, that's where you find the first delineation. Next is the Vison, or Vison wheat beer. These are also named in the Bavarian style, and more often found there, rather than Berlin beer. There are a couple of other modifiers that are used as well, but for the most part, these three names are what you'll find prefacing the beer part of the name of the beer. You may also find the word hef, or F. This means yeast, and it means the beer has not been filtered. This is particularly common with beer that's made in Bavaria and creates a cloudy beer. As a general rule, the large quantity of wheat has an effect on the distribution of different parts of the beer, the important one often being protein. A high protein content leads to a larger, longer-lasting head. This also results in haze in the beer. Between this and a yeast style that is retained means that you often get a much cloudier and somewhat awkward-looking beer. Depending on your personal tastes, this might not be desirable. What's important is the wheat itself doesn't have a lot of flavour. If you recall from some of our past videos, malting often contributes to the complexity of taste. With the little amount of malt that is in there, you find the flavours aren't as pronounced, but the mouthfeel is much smoother. Wheat beers are often almost looked at as a kind of version of lemonade, in that they are very carbonated, they bubble, they have little flavour, and they are quite refreshing, almost like a soft drink, but they also have alcohol. For this reason, on occasion they are combined with other beverages, particularly the previously mentioned carbonated drinks, such as cola, to give them more flavour. When making a wheat beer, it's made as an ale using ale yeast. This is another reason why the yeast winds up creating a haze. Ale is top fermenting and as a consequence sits above the beer itself. This means it remains in suspension for far longer. Combining this with the protein from the wheat means you get a large mesh network of various components all held in suspension. These beers are also often flavoured with herbs and spices during fermentation. This is more in line with the grist that was used to define beer in the early days of development. If you're looking to make a wheat beer, the process is not that different from making an ale, fortunately. You just need to be aware that you aren't going to be creating something with a strong flavour base, given the quantity of wheat you're using in lieu of malt. The first process is simply to steep your grains in a large grain bag. This is done to remove as much of the fermentable material as possible. The grains taken out, preferably recycled for use in something like bread. The wort you've created is then combined with the malt extract. This is then brought to a boil a second time. Your other flavouring agents like hops are then added. You then bring this down to a usable temperature, add your yeast and ferment it. This is roughly in line with the previously described process of creating beer. You can skip a few steps by doing it this way and using pre-extracted malt. If you're wanting to go with an all-grain beer, it's a little more complicated, but ultimately follows the same general gist. Ultimately, wheat beer is a good, relatively neutral beer to create. It doesn't have a strong, overpowering flavour, and it's often quite light and refreshing, making it ideal for summer. If you're looking at creating something that's more palatable to everyone, it's a good place to start. And if you're looking at something where you can modify, change, and alter the additional flavouring agents, like hops, herbs, and spices, it's a good place to start, as you can modify those without drastically altering the beer flavour as its base, meaning you can tailor what you want to get out of it specifically. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.